The rain was gentler tonight, not a storm like last week, but a slow, constant hush that wrapped around the house like a blanket. The kind of rain that made the windows fog, the kind that whispered instead of roared. Becky sat cross-legged on the couch, draped in a soft knitted throw. Her hair was still a bit damp from her shower, curling slightly near her collarbones. She wore one of her longer cardigans tonight, the hem reaching mid-thigh, but underneath it, Freyan had already glimpsed the edge of the delicate lace of her nightwear peeking through. She wasn't sure if Becky did it on purpose. But then again, Freyan wasn't sure of anything when it came to this girl anymore. Freyan sat at the small study table, setting her notebook down, pretending to focus on preparing lesson notes, pretending, because her eyes had drifted to Becky's exposed thigh more than once. And Becky had noticed. She didn't say anything, but the pink in her cheeks betrayed her awareness. Her toes curled under the blanket, and she hugged her knees slightly closer to her chest. The room was quiet. No TV. No music. Just the rain. And the tension between them. "I thought we were studying," Becky said finally, tilting her head to the side, one brow raised. Freyan cleared her throat. "We are. I was just setting up." "You've rewritten that title 3 times. I like precision." Becky smirked and stood, walking slowly toward her. "Or maybe you're just nervous." Freyan's jaw tensed. "Why would I be nervous?" Becky leaned against the edge of the table, her voice soft. "Because I haven't looked away from you in the last 10 minutes, and you've looked at everything in this room except me." Freyan inhaled sharply. Then finally looked up. Becky's eyes glowed warm in the amber light. She wasn't teasing now. She was just there, fully present, open, unreadable in the most infuriating way. Freyan leaned back slightly in her chair. "You're too observant. You're too mysterious." "That's on purpose." "And this?" Becky asked, motioning to the air between them. "Is this on purpose too?" Freyan didn't answer. Because she didn't know what this was anymore. Freyan stood up abruptly. "I think we should start with your comprehension exercises," she said, reaching for the worksheet folder. But Becky didn't move. Her fingers grazed the edge of Freyan's wrist as she passed the paper, and both of them felt the electricity jolt through that lightest of touches. Freyan pulled her hand back instinctively, not from disgust, but self-protection. "I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable," Becky whispered. "You didn't," Freyan said too quickly. "That's the problem." Their eyes locked again. Becky bit her lip gently, glancing down at the papers, but her voice was barely audible when she spoke next. "I'm not trying to play with you, Fran. I know. I just like being around you." Silence. "I'm not used to that," Freyan said finally. Later, when Becky sat cross-legged on the rug with her textbook open, Freyan sat behind her, not touching, but close enough to see the gentle rise and fall of her back as she breathed. "You're too quiet tonight," Becky murmured, not turning around. "I'm thinking about you." Becky froze for a second. Freyan's voice stayed calm, but there was a tremble under it, like a violin string being pulled taut. "I don't let people near me. Not like this. Not close enough to know anything real." Becky finally turned her head slightly to look at her over her shoulder. "I'm not asking you to spill everything," she said gently. "I just want to know what makes your eyes go soft when I wear lace." Freyan exhaled harshly and looked away, a small laugh escaping her lips. "You're dangerous. You say that like I'm not already in your head." "You are," Freyan admitted. And then softer. "And I don't know what to do with you." As the lesson ended, they sat near each other again, this time not facing anything academic. Just sitting. Just existing. Freyan sipped from the coffee Becky had made her, black with 1 sugar. Becky had remembered her exact order from their very first week. "You remember my coffee. You remember my favorite poem," Becky replied with a slight smile. "That line, 'I am made of all the places I've been broken.' You said it once and I never forgot." Freyan stared at her for a long moment. She felt something shift in her chest, painfully slow, like thawing ice. And she didn't stop Becky when her hand rested gently on Freyan's knee. Nothing more. No pulling her in. No kissing. Just the weight of a touch that said, "I'm still here. You're still safe." It was almost midnight when Fran realized she'd overstayed. Becky didn't ask her to leave. But Fran stood anyway, her jacket slung over one arm. "I'll go," she said softly. "Before it becomes something I can't take back." Becky stood too. She walked her to the door in silence. Before Fran reached for the handle, Becky turned and said, "Even if you never tell me everything, just don't lie about what you feel." Fran's voice was barely audible. "I haven't lied once since I met you." Becky nodded, eyes soft. "Good. Because neither have I." And then, just before Fran turned the handle, Becky reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her face. It was such a small gesture. But Fran's breath caught like it had never been touched before. Because maybe she hadn't. The next evening, the rain returned, and so did Fran. She hadn't planned to. She told herself it was too soon. That last night had already been too much. But she found herself driving toward Becky's place anyway, her mind louder than her bike engine. Becky opened the door in an oversized hoodie and soft cotton shorts. Her hair was braided this time, loose and a little messy. She looked like softness itself. And Fran wanted to collapse into her. "I didn't think you'd come again so soon," Becky said, voice tender. "I couldn't stay away." Becky smiled, not smug, not surprised. Just warmed. "I made hot chocolate," she said. "With cinnamon." Fran didn't know how to say thank you for remembering the little things, so she just took the cup, nodding, sipping in silence as they stood near the window. "You want to stay the night?" Becky asked suddenly. Fran choked slightly. Becky laughed. "I meant, it's raining. And late. And you always look tired." Fran's jaw relaxed. "That obvious? Only when you forget to fake being okay." That line hit too hard. Fran looked away. Becky didn't push. She just turned and walked back to the living room. "I'll set up the couch," she called softly. But that night, Fran didn't end up on the couch. It was around 1 a.m. when Becky woke up, having fallen asleep with her book on her lap. She got up to check if Fran needed a blanket, only to find her sitting on the floor in the hall, into the dark. "Couldn't sleep?" Becky whispered. Fran nodded. Becky sat beside her. Their shoulders brushed. Neither of them moved away. "You know," Becky whispered after a while, "sometimes I wake up feeling like I'm made of glass." Fran looked at her, finally. "Like if someone touched me the wrong way, I'd shatter," Becky said. "And I don't want to tell anyone because then they'll start walking on eggshells." Fran stayed quiet. She felt the weight of Becky's words. She didn't fully understand them, not yet, but she felt them. "I won't pity you," Fran said. "Not ever." Becky looked surprised, though she didn't know why. Maybe it was the way Fran said it, not as a promise, but a vow. "Then stay," Becky whispered. "Just here. Until the glass stops cracking." Fran leaned her head back against the wall. "Okay." At 2 a.m., they found themselves lying on the rug, side by side, staring at the ceiling. Not touching. Not speaking. Just there. And when Becky turned slightly and tucked her hand under Fran's, the older woman didn't pull away. She didn't flinch. She didn't analyze it. She just let it be. Their fingers laced gently. And for the first time in years, Fran slept, not out of exhaustion, but out of peace. Morning came slowly. Warm sunlight filtered in through the pale curtains. The storm had passed, but the ground still smelled like rain. Fran awoke to the weight of a blanket over her body and the gentle sound of humming from the kitchen. She sat up slowly, disoriented, heart fluttering at the memory of fingers entwined with hers. "Becky." Still humming softly to herself, Becky moved through the kitchen barefoot, a pink satin ribbon tying her braid together. Fran watched from the hallway, quiet, still, her chest aching with something unnameable. It was that feeling again. Like she was looking at something she could never have. Something too soft for her hands, too light for her darkness. Coffee? Becky asked, finally noticing her. Freya nodded. Please. As Becky passed her the cup, their hands touched again, but this time, neither pulled away. The skin-on-skin contact lingered. Did you sleep okay? Becky asked, eyes flicking up. With you next to me? Freya said before she could stop herself. Yeah. Becky's cheeks flushed. She looked down into her cup, biting her lip to hide the smile. I didn't snore, did I? No, Freya said. You murmured in your sleep. Did I say anything embarrassing? You said my name. Becky froze. Seriously? Freya nodded slowly. Just once. Like a sigh. Becky looked like she might melt right there on the floor. Later that afternoon, they ended up on the floor again, this tea. Becky had her legs stretched out across Freya's lap while holding the book above her face. Freya was still pretending to read her own, but her fingers had drifted close to Becky's knee, brushing the skin where the hem of her shorts stopped. Becky noticed. Freya didn't move. I like it, Becky said quietly. What? When you touch me like that. Like you're not sure you're allowed, but you're doing it anyway. Freya looked away, tension crawling up her spine. I don't want to cross lines, she said. You already have, Becky whispered. And I didn't stop you. That's when Freya's hand stilled, palm now flat against Becky's thigh. And Becky leaned up, eyes searching hers. Their faces were close now, too close. Becky tilted her head slightly, one hand reaching up to brush Freya's collar, her fingertips grazing the first open button of her shirt. Have you ever kissed someone who made you forget yourself? She asked softly. Freya swallowed. No. Becky smiled. Then don't kiss me yet. Freya blinked. What? Becky sat up fully now, pulling her legs from Freya's lap, eyes twinkling. I want to be the first one who makes you choose it. Not need it. Not lose control. But choose. Freya stared at her, stunned. Becky stood, stretched, and offered her hand. Come on. We're getting takeout. You owe me dinner for sleeping over. Freya took her hand, still silent, pulse racing. Because Becky wasn't like anyone, and Freya had the terrifying feeling that this, whatever this was, wasn't going to be something she could hide for much longer. Hello guys, please take a moment to subscribe to Rebecca's Blanket. Plus I love you guys a lot. They didn't speak much during dinner. Becky put on an old vinyl record, something moody and instrumental, and they sat cross-legged on the floor with their takeout between them, eating out of the cartons and passing chopsticks back and forth. Freya watched how Becky chewed thoughtfully, never in a rush, as if every small thing deserved time. Freya had never had dinner like this with anyone. Never this casual. Never this close. Becky sipped soup straight from the bowl, slouched slightly against the wall in her old hoodie and silk shorts, her bare legs stretched out and one foot brushing against Fran's. It wasn't flirtation anymore, not just that. It was familiarity. Warmth. And that scared Freya more than anything. You keep looking at me like I'm going to disappear, Becky murmured. Freya set down her bowl. I'm used to things leaving. Becky didn't speak. She just leaned forward, picking up Freya's hand without asking. She looked down at it, studying the lines in her palm. You hide so much in here, she whispered. Freya's fingers twitched. And you pretend you don't want to be held, Becky added. But this hand fits perfectly into mine. Freya's throat tightened. Don't say that. Why? Because I want to believe you. Becky looked up at her, and for the first time all night, something cracked behind her own eyes. Just for a second. Something tired. Something hurting. Freya saw it. She didn't know what it was, but You okay? Freya asked, gently. Becky blinked. And smiled, too quickly. Always, she said. Let's clean up. But Freya knew better. It was past 1 a.m. when they lay on the bed this time, Freya on top of the covers, Becky underneath them, both of them facing each other with only inches between them. Neither could sleep. Freya watched Becky's eyes slowly drifting closed and opening again, like she was battling thoughts in the dark. "What is it?" Freya asked softly. Becky opened her eyes again. She hesitated. "Then, do you ever feel like, if someone really saw you, they'd walk away?" Freya stared at her for a long moment. "Yes," she said. And then, gently, "But I'm still here, aren't I?" Becky didn't respond. Instead, she reached out and curled her fingers into Freya's shirt, just lightly, resting her hand on her chest. Right over her heart. "Stay," she whispered. "I'm not going anywhere." Becky's eyes fluttered shut again. But long after she drifted off, Freya lay awake, watching her chest rise and fall. And she knew, something was haunting Becky too. Something unsaid. Freya didn't know what it was yet. But when she found out, she swore to herself. She wouldn't run.